Hello, everyone, and welcome to another series of Leaders Connect. Today, I have a special guest, and I'll let him introduce himself. Welcome.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Daniel, the Daniel in SC Daniel, and it's great to be here with you today. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today, Daniel. It's always a pleasure to have you here. And when Daniel is here, we're going to be inspired from the Word of God, because that is one of his passions, is sharing the Word of God. And so today we're going to look at a man in the Bible by the name Jabez. And it depends on where you went to school, because someone else might pronounce the name as
Jabez. Jabez. Depends.
Yeah, so we're going to look at 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9 to 10. And I'm going to read it, then I'll give Daniel an opportunity to share with us briefly. And hang tight, this will be brief. All right, by the way, the title of today's talk is Standing Out. All right, so we find a very short prayer uttered by an obscure man. Jabez was more honorable than his brother, and his mom named him Jabez, saying, because I bore him with pain. Now, Jabez called on God of Israel, saying, "O Lord, bless me indeed, expand my territory." And what's the last part? Expand my territories. Let your hand be with me and keep me from harm, so I will be free from pain. And God granted his request. I love this story because Jabez would have settled and said, and let things flow, as his name states. But just because his mom gave him the name Jabez, meaning he gave birth to him in pain, Jabez did not let life continue and, on autopilot. But what did he say? What did he do? He called upon the Lord. He took it upon himself to call upon the Lord and to change the narrative of his story. Many times we find ourselves just letting things be because of the situations we find ourselves in. But we have so much power in our hands, and we get to be the captain of our ships or the captains of our lives. We get to choose the direction we want our lives to take, of course, under the guidance of the Lord. But don't settle. We see someone by the name Jabez deciding, hey, I'm going to cry out to the Lord. And he says these powerful words. So let me not take away from Daniel. He has something powerful, so hang tight. It's going to be sweet and short. And Daniel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. When looking at the story of Jabez, there are some things that stand out. One of them, as you have mentioned, is that he changed the narrative of his life. He did not let the outward circumstances of someone else define who he was. And how did he change it? There are two things. One of them is he was more honorable than his brothers. And number two, he cried out to God. That prayer, he asked for four things. One of them, he asked for God to bless him indeed. Not just bless me, but bless me indeed. The second one was enlarge my territory. The third one is let your hand be on me or with me. And the final one is keep me from harm so that I will be free from pain. He wanted to change his narrative, the narrative of pain. And he went to the one who can change it. And God granted his request. I'm pretty sure this is probably not the first time you've heard this story, or the second or the third time, because it's a favorite of many preachers, especially when you're talking about that feel good, keep me free from pain. But there are some things that stand out about Jabez. First of all, we only know of him from this text alone. And it's like the Melchizedek in the Bible where he just shows up and he disappears and you never hear from him again. But there is a town of scribes that may have been named after him, or that was associated with him, and that's found in 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 55. You go ahead and read it for yourself when you get a chance. 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 55. Those are the only two times that you hear Jabez mentioned. Now, on these accounts, he was more honorable than his brethren. He was of the same stock and the same lineage. He did not have nobility of birth. He was not distinguished by earthly titles. In all these respects, he was on the same level as his brothers. But God tells us that he was more honorable than them all. Why? Because he prayed and served his Maker. And he lived to do good among men. And you know what he received? Honor that comes from God. Now, there's something one more thing about enlarging territories. We talked about standing out, and that's where I will connect with part of it is speculation on my part about the town of scribes. Now, we know that Jabez called on God to enlarge his territory. There is, I believe it's called the Chaldean translation of this prayer that adds the line, enlarge my territory, enlarge my borders with disciples.
Oh, wow.
Then you find a town of scribes named after or associated with him. At this time of Chronicles, when the book of Chronicles was written, it was retelling the story of Israel to people who are in exile who wanted to know their history. And when they tell about Jabez, they're talking about enlarging the territory, which means conquering the Canaanites who were ungodly, who were living on the land. So for him to enlarge his territory, he has to drive out the godless and leave out God's agenda. When you add that to enlarge my borders with disciples, maybe, just maybe, this town of scribes ended up being named or associated with him because he discipled people. What kind of significance are you looking at? Most of the time when we hear the prayer of Jabez, we think about it from selfish means. It's all about me, me, me. Bless me indeed. Keep me safe from enemies. Enlarge my territory. Nothing wrong with that. But once that happens to you, what do you do with that territory? I'm sure God could have seen to his heart and known if this was for selfish reasons, he would not have granted his request. But the fact that God granted his request, and it's recorded for us to read thousands of years later, is because he was more honorable than his brothers. He wanted to change his narrative, and he went to the one who can change it. Do you want to live a life of significance? Do you want to stand out and not just be a footnote in history? There's only one who can do that for you. That is a God of heaven. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Daniel. That was powerful. And I like how you brought in the perspective of increasing your disciples. I had never heard of that before. That was unique. I always learn something new, even sitting next to you and listening to you. So thank you for sharing with us. And I'm thinking one of the things that we should do, we should include in our prayers is this prayer of Jabez, that Lord, let your hand be with us and keep us from harm so that we may be free from pain. That's a beautiful prayer. Of course, in addition to, receiving the blessings of the Lord, where he says that the Lord will bless me and enlarge my territories. Of course, that's a good part. But this last part really resonated with me too. That Lord, let your hand be with me and keep me from harm so that I will be free from pain. And God answered or granted his request. We have a God who cares for us. We have a God who honors the desires of our hearts, and he wants us to make our requests known to him. So let's make our requests known to God. And above all things, let's take time to spend time in the Word of God. It's enriching. I admire this man. Every day, before he picks up any call, before he finds out what's going on in the world, he begins the day with the Lord. Sometimes I get carried away by him religiously, faithfully. I've watched him do that, not for one day, not for 1 year, not for 2, 3, but consistently. Let's spend time in the Word. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. That was 12 minutes well spent. We appreciate you. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on social media as well as our podcast channel. Have an amazing week. And may the Lord bless you, increase your territories, his hand be upon you, and keep you from harm. You're blessed and you're loved of the Lord. Have an amazing week. Bye-bye.
Bye.